Hello. So, this recording is to supplement a talk I'm giving on the 14th of February at the Digital Learning Conference in Andover. So, I'm going to be talking today about artificial intelligence and using it maybe in a way you haven't thought of using it before, and that's for reflection on your teaching practice. I want to tell a little bit of a story about my supervising teacher when I was student teaching, Mr. Thurston. Great guy. Still talk to him. He's quite the man. He's been working at his school at Meridean Valley forever. Was a principal for a while, and said, "You know what? I really miss teaching." And he went back into the math classroom in the same school he was a principal at the year before. It really shows that he really loves the classroom. And what really impressed me was that he had his own ideas about lesson prep. So he's a math teacher, as am I, and he would go into the classroom and I would look at his lesson prep, which was a notebook. And on one side of the note, his little notebook, it had a couple of problems. He said, I want to have these problems worked out, and I want to have a couple of questions to ask the students that I really want answered. And it was very minimal, very minimal. And he would vamp for an hour on that math topic. He'd go through the lesson, he'd solve the problems he'd planned on solving, he'd go through the assessment and give them time to maybe work on some homework in class. And that was great. On the other side of the notebook was everything that he thought went well or didn't go well, his reflections on the day. And it always struck me that there was much more on that second half than on the first half. And I think that's good that we try to put that extra effort into reflecting on how we're doing and how we could be better, and trying to give ourselves props when we can, and also give ourselves that push to get better as we all learn. So I'm trying to apply that using this new AI tool. So that's what we're going to do. But first, I want to talk a bit about some AI basics. I do this. I debated whether to do this, but I really think it's really important because this is a new tool. Studies show that more than half of teachers have no formal training in how AI works. And I don't want to get too technical, just because I'm a science geek and a math guy, but I do think it's important for teachers to know a few things about it. So this thing for us started when we started hearing about this thing called GPT, and the P in GPT is pre-trained. And so AI starts with some pre-training, all right? It's basically just constantly going over a huge corpus of data, something they call the pile, which is basically all the internet, and as well as any data they can get their hands on. And what they're doing is they're trying to help the machine work out what comes next. If they say a couple things, if they say a question, what's the answer? If they say a phrase, you can complete the phrase. It's trying to get it to learn how language works. And first of all, the thing that you should know as a teacher is that this is, well, first of all, if you're a math teacher, know that this is all vectors and matrix multiplication. So all the stuff the students are using anyway, maybe you can say, hey, this is why we learned about matrices and vectors. But even if you're not a math teacher, all right, you should know that this takes in an enormous amount of data, and quality is not the thing that they care about. Quantity is. And so these researchers have not discovered the idea of a curriculum. All right. What I mean by that is that every Reddit post, every weird Twitter screed, every old Usenet post from the 90s talking about any topic you want, all went into that. And so a lot of garbage in. So that's the first thing to know, and not a lot of attention to quality. So that's going to come out in outputs, and that's something to know as a teacher who's using these things or watching students use these things. After the machine is pre-trained, they go through something called reinforcement learning and human feedback. All right, and this is humans asking questions, the machine answering, and them giving a thumbs up or thumbs down to how they thought the answer went. All right, and this is important for you as a teacher because, well, first of all, there's ethical discussions to be had. These were often low-paid workers, often offshore, who are paid to go through and ask and answer these questions an enormous amount. So that's something to speak about and think about. But the other thing to know is that whenever the machine said, I don't know, or I don't really have the information for that, often that was downvoted. People like when the machine answers correctly. They give the thumbs up to when the machine says this, solid answer. Even if that answer is wrong, people aren't the best at determining whether the answer was right or wrong, but the people were able to tell the difference between when the machine said, I don't know. Maybe you have counted a question that said IDK poorly on your tests as well. And so it's not surprising that this happened over and over again. The machine learned the lesson. It got slapped on the wrist whenever it said, I don't know. It doesn't say, I don't know now. So that's the thing to know as a teacher. All right. This is a big one that I see people online who aren't getting the most out of these tools don't know about the context window. Humans have some things they're not so good at compared to these machines. But they have some things that they are. And one of the things that we have that the machines don't yet is an excellent memory. These things, because they use matrix multiplication, every time a word is added, the matrix gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And multiplying a 3 by 3 matrix and a 6 by 6 matrix turns out that it's not twice as hard, it's 4 times as hard. It's a quadratic scale if you're into the math thing, which means that if you're trying to feed in an entire book length question into this thing, it's gonna break. It's gonna break because big answers when they square, or big questions when their length is squared, get really, really big. So the point is that every machine has this context window. It handles this by, it answers your question in the moment, and then it'll answer the next question. But as we move along, the entire, what they call the context of the conversation, gets too big for the machine to handle comfortably. So what does it do? It forgets everything that happens at the beginning, and it just kind of slides along there. All right. So long conversations will eventually, it'll kind of forget what happened at the beginning of the conversation. And this is something that I think most people miss if they're having a long back and forth. I know it's something that students miss as they feed in large amounts of text. You've got to be mindful of the context window. Different models have different context windows. And so one thing I do is that if you're having a long conversation, it's great to say, hey, recap everything we've discussed here so that we can be up to date on the conversation. If you do that every once in a while, that will always be recent enough in the context window to be important. So I think that's a good tip as you use these things. All right. Now, one of the things that we are going to talk about with our tool today that I'm going to dive in just a second is something called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. This is a way, they call it grounding the model. So because this thing was fed with the entire debt trace of the internet, because these things have a limited context window, it's important to bring up the important information that's going to be needed in the conversation and put that where it can be accessed directly. It's sort of like giving the machine a library book to cite. And RAG systems have a lot less of what they call hallucinations, a lot less making up answers, because what they'll do is they'll look to their sources and cite that in particular. And so RAG is something that you should look for in the tools that you are online and finding. And we're going to be talking about NotebookLM today. It is a RAG system. It does look through the sources in particular, and it gives you better performance. It gives you more, like I said, grounded behavior, less hallucinations. So yeah, look for it. Look for it. It's a good thing to look for. Now, as we talk today, I just want to encourage you to remember that these things are moving fast. There has been big changes even between when I proposed this talk and when I'm giving it. So I'm trying to give you up-to-date information, but it's moving fast, and constant experimentation is really needed here, because it's something that if it doesn't work today, it might work tomorrow. This is something called Humanity's Last Exam, which I am not a big fan of that naming, but it's basically a large list of very, very hard problems in made by experts in their field. And just a few weeks ago, just a few months ago, humanities last exam was being given to these systems, and they're getting single-digit percentages. Um, just 2 weeks ago, someone gave it the same exam, got a 26%. So we're seeing big changes within the course of months here, and so yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Now, we're going to get into specifics here, all right, because I want to teach you how to use this tool, specifically how to use it for reflection. So it's called NotebookLM. You're going to find it at notebooklm.google.com. It's a Google product, and let's dive right into it. So NotebookLM has some advantages, right? It is you can put in sources, all right, and like I said, this is a RAG system. You're going to put in sources that you're going to use to ask questions about. This causes reduced errors, and strikingly, it will admit ignorance when it doesn't know. If you ask a question about things that aren't in the sources, it'll say, "Oh, well, the sources really don't say much about this," and that's key. That's key. Um, it's very organized. Though one of the things that I like about NotebookLM is it collects all these sources and the chats and the outputs all in one place, so you can kind of organize things by project, which is important. And finally, it is integrated with the Google ecosystem. You can import Google files. You can export to a Google Note. If you're in the Google ecosystem like I am, Google fanboy right here, that's awesome. So, it does have some disadvantages. This thing is not awesome at formatting. All right, if you want to make a nicely formatted document output, then save it to a Google Doc or save it to a Word doc, or use another system. I think NotebookLM is great when used in concert with other AI systems. Like, hey, you've got lots of outputs, cited outputs like this. Give that to another model and say, hey, here's some cited outputs. Make a nicely formatted this, that, or the other. All right, so it's not the best at formatting, especially a math teacher. Google has never been awesome with math equations and whatnot, so that's frustrating for me. I try to keep it conceptual when I'm doing it. It'll give equations, but it'll be unreadable, especially with more complicated math. So just know that that's not a strength of this system. Analysis sometimes takes a backseat to synthesis. It'll take a huge corpus of data, it'll comb through, it'll find the things you're looking for. It's maybe not good at combing through all those and analyzing it in one step. So maybe what you want to do is you want to take one step to gather all the relevant stuff from the sources. Then maybe you can ask about that result. So just know that it'll pull in a lot of stuff, but maybe won't think about those things while it's pulling them in. And finally, it is a Google product. Google has been known to kill products. It's what they do. And so when I made this slide at first, I was a little worried. Now they've put big names behind it. It's been kind of a breakout hit. And so I'm not worried about NotebookLM going away now. But, Google does occasionally kill, very popular products. So just know that all the effort you put into learning something might disappear. That's okay. We're learning. We're moving on. So, like I said, you can get started by going to notebooklm.google.com, and it's gonna give you a choice to start a new notebook. All right, I have a couple notebooks here. I use it to prep for all my units and reflect, like I said, on my units. I also use it for home projects. I run a Dungeons and Dragons group with club with my students. I plan all my campaign events using Google NotebookLM. So, it's very useful, very useful. You can start a new notebook here. And the first thing it'll ask you to load in sources. So you'll kind of see there's 3 panes on NotebookLM. On the left are all your sources, and we're going to talk about those first. In the middle is the chat interface, something you might be more familiar with from using other chatbots, where you're going to talk about your sources. And on the right, you're going to see called the studio. It is the output section. So it kind of makes sense. The inputs, the interactions, and the outputs. And So let's talk about the inputs first, the sources. So you're going to load in the sources that you're going to need for your project. You can use all types of sources. Of course, you can use Word documents. You can use PDFs. All right. You can use text files, markdown files, um, web links. If you want to summarize websites, that's a great source. You want to bring in Google Docs directly. That's amazing. Google Slides, and crucially, I think YouTube videos. If you want to talk about a lot of learning happens on YouTube, you know that, and so bringing those in as sources are great. Um, I have not put Google Sheets on there. It, as far as I can tell, it has a little problem, at least currently, with spreadsheets. So that could change, and I could be wrong on that. But I have not had good luck with spreadsheets coming in here. But other sources are good. And then media. You can bring in videos, audio files, MP3s. So yeah, these are good sources. So bring all these in that you think might be useful to discuss, and then get to discussing them. So this is where we can talk about the context window of this machine, which is, I see it, is its biggest advantage. Google is not the best model out there, I'll say that, although I'm warming up to its new Gemini models. It's been really cooking lately. But one thing that Google does better than anybody else is handle enormous context lengths. You can see that ChatGPT only has like a 1200 token context length. You can see NotebookLM up there is just massive. It's just massive. You can bring in up to 50 sources. So we're talking about 50 documents, videos, audio, YouTube videos, 50 sources, which is just incredible, and get good analysis of those. So there we go. Context window, one of the big strengths here. By the way, they've rolled out NotebookLM Plus now to all Gemini Plus subscribers, and that's up to 500 sources, and it's just getting better. So anyway, pull in everything you think you might need, and then a couple other things. Throw in the kitchen sink. It's awesome. Okay. So as we're talking about sources, I think one of the biggest attitude shifts we as teachers need to do is we need to focus on unstructured data and its valuable nature. When I'm talking about unstructured data, I'm talking about low quality stuff that we would normally think of as throwaway data. And we have a ton of it in virtual teaching. We have classes that are recorded. Everything I say is recorded on those recording calls, and I want to collect that. I want to collect that because that is now data that I can use. All right, chats. There's a chat pod when I'm talking with students. All those chat logs, unstructured data. I want to be mindful of things like privacy and permissions and that sort of thing, but I also want to be not mindful of the fact that all this data can be used to kind of gather together to see how class is going and what students are learning, what they're not learning, what I can do better. So it requires an attitude shift, because we would think all this stuff is just a stream of data that's just moving along and then it's gone. But no, these things can be collected, and I think as teachers we need to think about how they should be collected, because they can give us valuable insights into our class. Okay, so we've talked about the sources. Let's talk about the chat logger. These are great things that you can use. You can ask about your sources. I usually start by loading in some of the textbook files and maybe some YouTube videos that I found interesting for understanding the topic. And also, I will say, hey, I've got a 10-day window here that I'm trying to plan for this unit. Give me a plan for each day and cover as many of the essential skills as possible here. So you can do all that for planning. I also pull in all the recording transcripts from the classes and all the chat logs and all that unstructured data I was just talking about. And here's where you can get to the meat of reflecting on teacher practice. Because when we do this, I can ask important questions like, what are some students, what are some student misconceptions that happened in the chat. What are some of the questions I asked? If I use the right format, I can ask about question wait time. I can ask about depth of knowledge questions. Did I ask a lot of questions? Level 1 questions, level 2 questions. Did I ask any level 4s? What were they? And where did I have an opportunity to ask more high depth of knowledge questions that I didn't? What are some of those? And that's some important stuff that I can keep for next year. This is the first time I'm teaching Algebra 2. I'm teaching it new this year. This is why I'm putting a lot of focus on reflecting. I want to tighten up the iteration of getting better faster. And so asking those questions about what happened in class using that unstructured data, super useful. One thing you should notice about this that is maybe different from some of the other interactions you've had with some of these tools, the chat disappears. All right. Every time you hit refresh on that chat, the chat is brand new. It does not stay around. It is gone in the wind. So if you want to retain the stuff that you've had, if you get some good outputs, you can do that. You can. There's a little button on the bottom. It says Save to Note. You can move that over into a note where you can say, there we go. So the chat interface is ephemeral. It is here today, gone tomorrow. Use it to get your questions answered. And then if there's something valuable in there, I want you to conscientiously save it save it over to a note. And then if you want, make it a new source for you to act on later. But the chat, like I said, disappears. I want to talk about a technique that I think is useful in AI in general. It's called activating the latent space, but I call it building your brain trust. All right. Basically, one of the things that I miss the most with virtual teaching is interaction with my fellow teachers, asking them for their advice, and I still get that. And we do a lot of reflecting on each other's lessons. We watch each other, but we don't do it as much as we would like. I don't have the time to watch 3 of my colleagues' lessons every week, and they don't have time to watch 3 of mine. All right, so the more reflection I can get, the better. And so what I've done is I've built up a couple personalities, and I've explicitly talked about what they are and what they care about. And I try to make them personalities that care about different things than I do. So over here, I've got Mrs. Frizzle, Mr. Spock, Mrs. Nope, Mrs. Sprout, and Gandalf down at the bottom. And they do things differently than I do. They care about different things than I do. Frizzle likes hands-on activities. She likes art. She tries to put the STEAM. They talk about STEAM. They put as opposed to STEM. That's her bailiwick. She likes hands-on activities. It's not something I'm able to do very often in virtual, and so having her constantly prodding me to say, "Hey, is there something you could ask? Could they build something? Could they make a flip book? Is there some sort of tangible hands-on activity that you could use here?" It's important prod to have. Spock there is all about structure, and if you've ever had that instructional coach that will remind you to put your learning objective on the board, not always my favorite person. All right, but it's an important sentiment that students should know there's a structure to things. That students, especially virtual students, they need that structure. And I am not a structured guy. So Spock is there to say, hey, did the students know what was going to happen in your lesson today? And then did you make those promises early on? Did you deliver on them later? Then Nope from Leslie Nope from Parks and Rec. She is an SEL expert. All right. I am an ex-engineer. I'm about as emotionally out of touch as a person can be. So occasionally I need to be reminded that people are human beings that have feelings. And I've been reminded over and over again that the hardest part about learning math is not the math. It's the emotional aspects of doing something hard, about trying and failing. It's that social emotional stuff that I am not the best at. And Nope reminds me to you complimented people when they got something right. You did sort of a here's what you did right, here's what you did wrong. She reminds me about growth mindset. That's what I do there. Then I have Sprout, who's a biologist. I'm more of a physics guy, and so I forget that math can be used for some of the more squishy sciences. So she reminds me of that. And then Gandalf is at the bottom. He's the philosopher. He tells me to take it back to the why. What does it mean for students' lives? What are the bigger questions? Um, you know, because I can get stuck in the minutia of finding out how to calculate a logarithm. But there's some big questions about things that need to be answered, and students like that too. Okay. So the final thing out here is the outputs, and the outputs are divided into notes, which you can take notes on what you learn in your chats. You can just take type notes. This is a great way to bring in your own typed thing, and eventually, if your notes are useful enough, you can turn them into a source. That's a button at the bottom. One of the things that made NotebookLM go viral is the audio outputs. The audio outputs. So you can turn these notes into documents. Of course, there's buttons to create study guides, for briefing documents, for facts, timelines, all sorts of tailor-made outputs for you there. Like I said, I don't think it shines at producing outputs. I think it shines at more analyzing and then I use other tools to make my final outputs. But if you want a FAQ, an FAQ there, go ahead and just click the button and then have something else formatted. It's great. But like I said, this can build an audio output, an actual podcast with two people talking about your topic. I found this useful in the prep phase. Like if I'm about to start a new unit, I make the audio thing. I get on the treadmill in the morning, and I hear 15 minutes on what's going to come up in the unit. And that lets me do a little bit of in my head planning on what the hard things are going to be. So awesome tool. They get a little bit repetitive after a while. People were very excited about these natural sounding podcasts. It is an amazing technical achievement. But it does get samey after a while, and so I don't think they're super useful. They're not the most useful thing about NotebookLM, but they are really impressive. So listen to a couple things I want you to take away from this. So the first thing to remember is that NotebookLM and these tools are giving us a chance to learn information just when we need it, and also our students are going to be able to learn information just when they need it. We are we've worked hard for hundreds of years to try to do just in case learning, where we give students the information they're going to need just in case they're going to need it. And that was okay when things were limited in scope. There's so much to know now that it's one of those things that I think we have to be more comfortable with students not knowing things a day before they need it, and then getting that information, collecting it all together, and getting a good summary, and then being able to operate in a flexible way with brand new information. And you will too. So downloading that information and using it, I think, a skill we're going to have to get better at. A skill we're going to have to help our students get better at. All right. Also, I want you to take away that you can use AI to learn AI. This is something a teacher at my school was saying. I was a little intimidated at using this tool. She was talking about a school AI chatbot. So she was talking about, and then I realized I could use that chatbot to talk to about how to use it. And that's something that's definitely true with NotebookLM. One of the notebooks you'll have access to is sort of all about NotebookLM notebook, which has as sources things that have been written about the tool and how to use it, and some users manuals and that sort of thing. And you can use NotebookLM to learn about it. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is that sometimes when a tool first rolls out, because of the way pre-training works, it will have no information about the model itself. If you ask a brand new Gemini model about that Gemini model, it will not know itself, which makes people uncomfortable sometimes, because we like to think that we know a lot about the things close to us, and then a little about the things far away from us. And so when a model does not know anything about its own workings, we get a little bit, we're like, well, it must not know anything. No, it was trained on information from 6 months ago. And so if it's brand new, it doesn't have information about itself. So just be careful about brand new stuff when you're doing this. But in general, I still think it's worthwhile to use AI to learn about AI. All right, let's figure out what to take out of this talk. Reflection, super important, and it's the answer to what to do with all your copious amounts of free time. Now that AI is making lesson planning a little bit easier, um, we could give some of that time back to our families, but that's no fun. Let's instead use at least some of that time to reflect on the lessons that we've done and kind of tighten up that iterative process of getting better as we go on through our teaching careers. Um, the other thing I want to remind you is to collect as much data as you can, even if it seems low quality right now. Even if the tools right now can't really pull much out of it, the tools in when you get back to this next year, when you get back and teaching this unit again, the tools would be better. And wouldn't it be great to use the tools of 2026 to analyze your 2025 class on the Civil War and say, hey, this is what happened in the class. Make my class me, but better in this case. And I think that's an awesome tool. So collect that data. And finally, these things are fast evolving, faster than we can really kind of keep up with. And you got to be at once okay with not always being up to date, and also, constantly experimenting, trying new things. Your students are trying new things. It's one of their superpowers. It's one of the things I can learn from my students is how unafraid they are to adopt new things. And so channel that within yourself. Use it to be the best teacher you can be. All right, that's what I've got. Thank you so much for listening to this talk. If you have any questions, you can find me at calebking.com. That's CALEOBKING at gmail.com. Or you can find me, I'm a teacher at Kansas Connections Academy, and so you can find me there. I'm also on X as Caleb King. So yeah, it's one of the advantages of having an oddly spelled name. That's CALEOB. Let me know if I can do anything to help. Everyone have an awesome day. Thank you.